She doesn't run, she barely breathes. 1,000 pounds of muscle, fur, and hunger pressed flat against the ice. So still she could be a snowdrift. 50 meters ahead, a ringed seal basks beside its breathing hole, unaware. The wind is perfect. The geometry is almost right. Almost. And then the ice shifts. A deep groan rolls through the floe beneath her, a sound like the earth itself exhaling. The crack spreads 2 meters to her left in under a second. She freezes harder than she already was. The seal lifts its head, looks around, settles back down. She holds, she waits. She has been here before. What you are watching is not just a hunt, it is the most sophisticated stalking behavior documented in any land based predator on the planet, executed on a surface that is actively disappearing. This bear has traveled nearly 90 kilometers in the last 4 days. She hasn't eaten in 3 weeks, and the ice she hunts on, the only hunting ground her species has ever known, is shrinking beneath her at a rate her biology was never designed to handle. This is the story of the polar bear, not the symbol, not the poster animal for climate campaigns. The actual predator, the real animal, calculating, ancient, and extraordinary, now locked in a survival confrontation, unlike anything her species has faced in 200,000 years. To understand what this bear is doing, you have to understand what sea ice actually is to a polar bear. It isn't habitat in the way a forest is habitat for a wolf, or a coral reef is for a shark. It's something more intimate than that. Sea ice is her tool, her weapon platform. Without it, she is not an apex predator anymore. She becomes something far more desperate. The Arctic sea ice forms each autumn as temperatures drop, spreading out from the polar cap across the Beaufort, Chukchi, Kara, and Hudson Bay seas. At its winter peak, it covers roughly 14 million square kilometers, an area larger than the entire Antarctic continent, but the ice is not uniform. It fractures, ridges, and refreezes constantly. Some sections are 10 meters thick, others are barely a skin over black ocean water, and the polar bear knows the difference, not from training, from something older than that. She tests the surface as she moves. Subtle weight shifts reading vibrations through her paws with a sensitivity that researchers at the Norwegian Polar Institute have described as genuinely remarkable. Each footfall is a data point. Pressure feedback from the ice telegraphs density, thickness, structural integrity. She is, in the most literal sense, reading the ground she stands on in real time. This is a predator that evolved specifically for this surface. Polar bears diverged from brown bears somewhere between 150,000 and 6 lakh years ago. The estimates vary, but what matters is what that divergence produced. Hollow guard hairs that trap warmth, black skin beneath the white fur to absorb any available sunlight, enormous slightly webbed forepaws that double as paddies in open water, a metabolic system tuned to run on one of the richest foods on earth, seal blubber at extraordinary efficiency. But the single most important adaptation is not physical, it's behavioral. The still hunt, and it is in its own silent way one of the most breathtaking things in nature. She has moved perhaps 4 meters in the last 12 minutes. Her body is angled precisely downwind of the seal. Her head is low, face almost touching the ice. She is using behavioral strategy that researchers call aquatic stalking, a method that requires a bear to integrate wind direction, ice topography, visual barriers, and the predictable behavior of its prey into a single, continuously updated calculation. Here is what makes this extraordinary. Ringed seals are not easy prey. They are alert, fast in the water, and hardwired to detect predators. Their primary defense mechanism is their breathing hole, or rather a network of breathing holes called igloo, which they maintain through the ice using the curved claws on their front flippers. A single seal typically maintains between 6 and 12 igloo holes across its territory, spread over several hundred square meters. If it senses a threat at one hole, it simply dives and resurfaces at another. The bear knows this. She has to anticipate which hole the seal will use, position herself where it can neither see nor smell her, and then wait sometimes for hours for the seal to surface at the right one. Think about the cognitive load of that. She is not just being patient, she is running a continuous probabilistic model. Wind angle, seal behavior, eye stability, her own position, energy expenditure versus likely reward. All of it processed in a brain that, relative to body size, is remarkably capable of spatial memory and forward planning. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Mammalogy documented polar bears using ice ridges, the pressure ridges that form where two ice sheets collide and buckle upward, as visual cover during approach. Bears in the study didn't just avoid being seen, they actively used topographic features to mask their silhouette, selecting paths that kept elevated ice between themselves and their target for as long as possible. She moves again another 3 meters, impossibly slow. Her breath comes in controlled pulses, vapor wisping sideways in the wind before it can rise and alert the seal. This is not instinct running on autopilot. This is a decision making happening in real time on a surface that gives her almost nothing to work with. Here is a number worth sitting with. A female polar bear in her prime needs to consume roughly 2 kilograms of fat every single day just to maintain her body weight, not to grow, not to reproduce, just to stay even. A ringed seal provides somewhere between 30 and 40 kilograms of usable fat when it is in good condition. That's roughly 3 weeks of energy reserves if she catches one. A bearded seal, larger and richer, can carry her even further, but both species require the same thing from the bear: sea ice as hunting platform and time. The problem is that both are now in increasingly short supply. The Arctic has warmed at roughly 4 times the global average rate over the last 50 years. The sea ice extent, the area covered by ice at any given time, has declined by about 13% per decade since satellite records began in 1979. More critically, the seasonal timing has shifted. Ice forms later in autumn and breaks up earlier in spring, compressing the window when bears can hunt. For a bear like her, she is not abstract data. It is the fundamental rhythm of her life, thrown off in ways that compound across every season. In Western Hudson Bay, researchers from the University of Manitoba tracking polar bears over several decades documented a striking pattern. Bears were coming ashore in summer, forced off the ice by early breakup, measurably thinner than bears from the same area recorded in 1980s. Body condition scores dropped. Cub survival rates fell. The bears were not dying dramatically, they were eroding. Fasting is something polar bears can do. They are built for it biologically. During ice-free summer months in some regions, bears enter what's called walking hibernation, a metabolic slowdown that allows them to conserve energy while active, drawing on fat reserves with unusual efficiency. Compared to other large mammals, their kidneys recycle protein, their heart rate drops, they reduce unnecessary movement. But there is a hard limit. A bear that enters the ice season already depleted, having come off the previous summer lighter than she should be, arrives at the hunting grounds with less margin for failure. A missed hunt costs more. Each failed stalk takes a larger percentage of her remaining reserves. The math tilts, and the ice season is getting shorter every year. She is 15 meters away now. The seal is facing away from her, and that matters enormously. Ringed seals spend most of their surface time in a repeating cycle. Breath, look around, sleep briefly, repeat. The interval between their scanning behaviors averages somewhere between 20 and 40 seconds. Bears that have been studied long term learn to read this rhythm. and time there advances to the seconds when the seal's head is down. She is doing that right now, head down. She moves, head up. She freezes. Every muscle in her body locked, eyes open, processing. The seal has not detected her, but the ice has one more move to make. 30 meters to her right, an older section of floe weakened by the slightly warmer subsurface water that's been eating at it from below for weeks, gives a single resonant crack, not the catastrophic split, just a warning. The seal's head snaps up. It looks directly towards the sound and then it looks not at her, but near her. Its vision is not designed for detecting motionless objects, but one involuntary muscle twitch, one breath too large, one paw shifted to redistribute weight. She holds 3 seconds, 6, 9. The seal drops its head again. She exhales through her nose in a single controlled stream, almost imperceptible, and she moves. What does the ocean under that ice look like right now? Cold, dark, and incredibly alive. The Arctic Ocean is not the biological desert it looks like from the surface. Beneath the ice, in the marginal ice zones where open water meets the frozen edge, upwelling nutrients from deeper water fuel explosive phytoplankton blooms each spring, the foundation of an entire food web that ultimately supports everything up here, including her. That bloom feeds zooplankton. The zooplankton feeds Arctic cod. The cod feeds ringed seals. The seals feed polar bears, orca, and human hunters who have lived here for thousands of years. It's a chain with almost no redundancy. Weaken any link and the effects travel upward with speed. And here's where the story gets more complicated and more urgent than most people realize. Warming is not just removing ice, it's restructuring the entire Arctic marine ecosystem from the bottom up. Studies published in Nature Climate Change over the last decade have documented dramatic shifts in where, when, and how densely phytoplankton blooms from beneath and around the ice. The timing of these blooms, critical to the survival of the entire food web above them, is decoupling from the life cycles of the animal that depend on them. Ringed seal pups born in snow layers built over breathing holes in late winter need their mothers to be healthy and well fed during the nursing period. If the prey the mothers need most is arriving at the wrong time or in the wrong place, the pups come out lighter, more vulnerable to predation, more likely to die before their first winter, which means fewer seals, which mean less prey for her. The bear doesn't know any of this in the way we understand it, but her body is keeping score. Every hunt, every failed stalk, every kilometer traveled on the deteriorating ice, it all registers in fat reserves and muscle mass and ultimately in whether she produces a cub this season or next. There is a particular kind of sea ice that researchers now call first year ice that formed last autumn rather than accumulating over multiple years. It is thinner, less stable, structurally different from the multi-year ice that used to dominate much of the Arctic Ocean. In 1985, multi-year ice make up roughly 60% of Arctic sea ice coverage. By the early 2020s, the figure had dropped to under 20%. The Arctic is increasingly covered by young thin ice, and for a 1,000-pound predator, the difference matters enormously. Multi-year ice is rough, ridged, complex. It provides topographic cover. It has the structural integrity to support a bear in full sprint, the explosive final rush that ends a successful stalk. First-year ice is smoother, flatter, and far more likely to fracture under the mechanical stress of a large animal, accelerating hard. She has already lost 3 potential hunt sites today to ice failure. At one, she approached to within 8 meters of a seal before a section gave way with a crack like gunshot, sending the seal driving before she could reach the hole. The bear stood at the edge of the fracture for a long moment, watching the dark water close over the bubbles before turning away. That behavioral response, stopping, observing the field side, then returning and walking without hesitation, is itself worth nothing. There is no visible distress in it, no thrashing, no vocalization, just a quiet, efficient recalibration. She logged the failure and moved on. The emotional economy is part of what makes polar bears such extraordinary survivors. But even extraordinary survivors have limits. She is 7 meters away. 5. The seal is sleeping, not the light, intermittent dose it performs between scanning bouts, but a slightly deeper rest. Its breathing has slowed, its body is relaxed against the ice. This happens sometimes after feeding, when a seal has recently eaten and its guard fractionally drops. She reads this, maybe not consciously, in the way we'd frame it, but in the way a predator with half a million years of coevolution with this specific prey reads it. Through some integration of body language, breath rate, the precise angle of the seal's flippers, information she has been processing since the first moment she spotted it. She rises slightly from her belly, transitions to a crouch. Her hindquarters gather beneath her, and then in a single explosive movement, that generates more than enough force to cross 5 meters in under a second. She charges. The strike happens in a fraction of a second. Her forepaws come down in a hammer blow powerful enough to break through 2 feet of ice, crushing the seal before it has any chance of reaching. In terms of raw predatory efficiency, this final millisecond is almost surgical, a precise deployment of tremendous force targeted with accuracy that requires perfect approach geometry, which is everything she spent the last 40 minutes building. She has her seal. She will consume the skin and blubber first, the richest parts, the parts she needs most urgently. The muscle and organs come next. A bear, a genuine nutritional deficit will consume almost everything: bone, internal organs, in some cases, even the hide. Once the blubber is stripped, nothing is wasted. For the next 7 hours, she will eat slowly, deliberately, resting between sessions. She is not eating with the frantic urgency of a predator that fears losing its kill to competitors. Up here, there is often no one else to take it. She eats with a calm that looks almost meditative, the calm of an animal that has just resolved for now the single most pressing equation in its life. But only for now. The bears that field researchers track across the Beaufort Sea and Hudson Bay are not just individual animals. They are data points in a long, slow story that researchers have been reading for decades. The southern Hudson Bay subpopulation, one of 19th recognized polar bear populations globally, has been studied in detail since the 1980s. The numbers are unambiguous. In the late 1980s, researchers estimated around 1100 bears in the region. By 2021, aerial surveys and marked recapture studies suggested the population had declined by roughly 30%. Similar trends have been documented in the western Hudson Bay and southern Beaufort Sea populations. Not all populations are declining at the same rate. Some high Arctic subpopulations where sea ice loss has been slow or the prey base has remained more stable have held steady or shown less dramatic change, but the directional trend across most studied populations points the same way. What makes these numbers hard to sit with is the time scale of polar bear reproduction. Female polar bear typically do not reach sexual maturity until 4 or 5 years of age. They typically give birth to 1 to 3 cubs in a maternity den, usually excavated in snow on land during the winter months. Cubs stay with the mother for about 2.5 years, during which time she cannot become pregnant again. That means a successful female polar bear in optimal conditions might produce 5 or 6 litters in her entire lifetime. When survival rates fall, when cub mortality climbs because mothers are arriving at the denning session in poorer condition. That low reproductive rate means population recovers slowly, decays slowly, possibly longer than the time scale on which the ice is changing. She has 2 cubs from her last litter. They spend the summer on land, waiting for the ice to return, living primarily off whatever terrestrial food sources were available: birds, eggs, berries, kelp, the occasional beached marine mammals, sargass. Summer terrestrial food is real. It exists, but it is not the caloric equivalent of seal blubber, and the bear's bodies reflect that. One of her cubs is healthy, strong, curious, learning to follow ice edges and read seal signs just by watching her. The other is smaller, thinner. It has survived 2 full winters, but its body condition scores. If a researcher were here to take them, would raise concern. She hunts, she feeds, she comes back to where her cubs wait on stable section of older ice. She nurses them still, even though they are approaching the age when nursing typically ends. An unusual extension that field observations have noted in bears whose cubs are under conditioned, her body giving what it has, even when it cannot easily afford to. There is something scientists have been increasingly documenting about polar bears that should make us reconsider how we frame this animal's predicament. They learn specifically, they update their hunting strategies based on observed changes in their environments. In recent years, researchers studying bear in Beaufort Sea and around Svalbard have documented behavioral shifts that go beyond individual adaptation. Patterns that suggest bears are changing their hunting strategies in response to altered ice conditions at a population level. Bears are spending more time hunting in open leads, the cracks between ice sheets where seals surface to breath, and polar bears can ambush from the ice edge. This is not a new behavior, but its frequency has increased as stable, flat hunting platforms become harder to find. Some bears have been observed hunting at tidal glacier fronts, the points where glaciers calve into the sea, where seals congregate on newly calved ice debris, again not entirely new, but increasingly documented and almost certainly a response to declining sea ice quality elsewhere. In 2019 study led by researchers from the University of Alberta, bears fitted with GPS collars and accelerometers were found to be adjusting their activity pattern based on ice concentration data, moving more on days with higher ice coverage, conserving energy when ice was fragmented. The bears were not just reacting, they were anticipating, adjusting behavioral budgets based on environmental cues in ways that required prospective cognition, thinking about what's coming, not just responding to what's here. That is an animal with a relationship to its environment that goes deeper than instinct. It is an intelligence shaped by ice, for ice refined over countless generations to read a world that is now changing faster than any generation before has ever had to contend with. She found the seal today. That's what her intelligence, her patience, and her evolutionary inheritance got her. One seal, 3 weeks of energy. If she manages it well, and tomorrow she will walk back out onto the ice and begin the calculation again. Now the last question. Here is the thing that lineager after you spend time with science on polar bears. It is not the decline numbers. It is not even the ice loss projections. Though those are stark and getting starker. The thing that stays with you is something more fundamental. In the evolutionary history of life on Earth, species have faced extinction before asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, radical climate shifts across geological timescales. The fossil record is a chronicle of loss as much as it is chronicle of survival. Most species that have ever existed are gone. But what's happening to polar bears is different from those ancient extinctions in one particular way. It is happening within the span of human memory, within the careers of researchers who started studying these animals when populations were stable and who are now watching the data curves trend downward in real time. And the mechanism warming driven by atmospheric carbon accumulation is one we produced, not as a species acting with malicious intent, but as a civilization burning through an energy source so abundant and so useful that the consequences were not fully confronted until they were already deep inside their unfolding. The bear on the ice made everything she is today work. She held still in the wind, she reads the seal's rhythms, she covered 50 meters of open ice without being detected, and she struck with precision and power, and she ate. She did everything right, everything her species evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to do, and she will do it again tomorrow. and the day after that, and as long as the ice allows. The question, the one that doesn't resolve, that sits in the mind like splinter, is not whether she is extraordinary. She is unambiguously in the cold clarity of the Arctic, hunting on a medium that is disappearing with an intelligence refined by 500,000 years of pressure and cold and darkness and perfect. Ancient predatory geometry, the polar bear is one of the most remarkable things evolution has ever produced. The question is what kind of world we are building around the extraordinariness, and whether what we are building leaves room for it. If this reached something in you, the eyes, the patience, the weight of it, subscribe to WildLabX. This is what we make here. Nature without softening, the real thing.